Good evening, everyone. I'm Nellie Szilagyi-Benedek, Deputy Director for Education and Programs at the Jewish Museum, and I am pleased to welcome you to our Director's Talk series, in which our director, James Snyder, is in conversation with artists, writers, and other cultural figures around issues relating to this complex moment in time. These talks are part of the Morris W. Offit Lecture Series, made possible by the Jack, Joseph, and Morton Mandel Foundation. We are extremely grateful for the support. As those of you who attended last week's talk are aware, after the tragic events of October 7th, we at the Jewish Museum felt it was important to think about our role as an art museum and how we could be responsive and engage with our community in a meaningful way. And what we came up with is a plan that includes installations of relevant works of art and public programs like this one, providing the space for creative thinkers to talk about their work and the issues at hand from a cultural and social perspective. The aim with this evening's program and the talks that will follow is to share ideas and prompt dialogue. And I would like to remind everyone that this is a space for civil discourse and mutual respect. Our speakers tonight are James Snyder and artist Zoya Cherkassky. Zoya Cherkassky's work has been shown internationally at numerous museums and cultural institutions. In 2017, the Israel Museum in Jerusalem presented a mid-career survey of her work, and Cherkassky's art is included in many permanent collections, including the Jewish Museum. Notably, and with particular relevance to our program tonight, her drawings titled 7 October 2023 are on view on the third floor of the Jewish Museum through March 18, 2024. Cherkassky's works are provocative, often shocking, and sometimes, as in the October 7th drawings, straightforward in their depiction of savagery and brutality. They can be strident in tone and uncompromising in their messages. Instead of hinting at the dark aspects of historical events and daily life, Zoya Cherkassky tackles them head-on, daring us to look and to confront the often harsh realities that at times inspire her work. At other times and with other subjects, her work also employs dry humor to depict the challenges of our world, both mundane and uncommon. We are looking forward to hearing her speak more about her practice and perspective tonight. Please join me in welcoming our speakers, James Snyder and Zoya Cherkassky.
Good evening to all of you. It's a pleasure to have all of you here with us. We will start in a moment, but as I often do, Nellie, where did you go? Here, Nellie Benedek, who is our Deputy for Education, does an amazing job. An amazing job with education programming. Look, it's a Monday night in the middle of winter. It's February, it's dark out there, and we're actually sold out. We are a completely full house, and I'm looking, and all these seats are full, and we thank all of you for being here, but we thank Nellie for her enthusiasm in making programming like this happen. So, Nellie, thank you. As Nellie's already described, tonight is the second in our series of talks looking at the complexity of these times through a cultural lens, talking to writers, artists, creative makers of all kinds. Perhaps some of you were here with us last week when Ruby Namdar was here with us, the Israeli-born Persian heritage fiction writer whose personal history really comes from the 3,000 years of the First Temple diaspora. His writing is deeply moving, intertwining antiquity and the present and Jerusalem, where he was born, and Israel and the diasporic world. He lives and works now here in New York, and he looks at the Middle East as a Middle Easterner from a Western perspective, still writing in Hebrew, even though he writes from here in the U.S. Our guest tonight is Zoya Cherkassky. She's amazing. You know, what I was about to say about Zoya is that she was a Soviet-born emigre to Israel, and she, Ruby Amdar, is an Israeli looking at the Middle East from outside. Zoya really was an outsider coming from the Soviet Union to Israel, and she looks, and her experience is really anchored there, and she looks from there to the rest of the world. Just as a preamble to the evening, I want to say that for me, having started my tenure here just 3 months ago, some of you know me, my trajectory was from the Museum of Modern Art to the Israel Museum in Jerusalem, and now 3 months ago, here to the Jewish Museum. My sort of intellectual engagement on the cultural landscape was from modernism to the universalism of the Israel Museum and to the notion of unique cultures wandering in the global diaspora, which is what this museum is all about. And you know, many cultures today are like the Jewish world culture, meandering in the global diaspora, a phenomenon that really resonates with what we are all seeing today as the phenomenon of global migration, which in a way is a phenomenon, in a way is a crisis, precipitating a lot of the challenges that we're experiencing now worldwide. You know, before October 7, museums were already needing to think about what their role and responsibility are after COVID in the new virtual age, in the contentious world that we were already experiencing, and really thinking about the responsibility of museums as agents for cultural activism, for cultural diplomacy. October 7 has been a flashpoint in many respects. We just now experienced it, making the Middle East a kind of flashpoint. And you know, many of us know the kinds of before and after moments that we've seen over the last several decades. 9/11 is an easy one to recall, where our sense of the world was one way and then suddenly changed. And we've experienced this now in terms of what October 7 has done to us. For we in the museum world, and I know from the enthusiasm we've just heard, that many of you know what we've been doing here in the Jewish Museum, that we did message very quickly after October 7, condemning brutality, calling for the restoration of humanism, which is the core of our being, and citing the fundamental responsibility of museums to be the custodians of the legacy of cultural heritage. For us in this museum especially, we feel that we need to be a platform for education and engagement. Nellie cited this. We speak of it all the time. We do see that activism culturally is a pathway to a brighter time. And as I said, as our unwelcome guests left, cultural activism is an antidote to the kind of political polarization that is doing what it can to overtake us now. So these talks are meant to be not at all about politics. Again, they're meant to be about looking at these times through a social, cultural lens. This is part of our action plan. Part of our plan also is to give opportunities to artists to show their response to October 7 and the tragedy that followed. Zoya has special stature this evening. She is our guest speaker, but she is also the first artist to be presenting at the museum as this series. We hope, that many of you on your way here stopped on the 3rd floor to see her drawings of October 7 and thereafter, and we'll be speaking about that as we continue. First, I really want us to focus on Zoya's history. She was born in Kyiv in 1976. She went to Israel in 1991. She was 15 years old. This is just before the collapse of the Soviet Union. She really was part of the migration of well over 1 million Russians to Israel over these last several decades. That community is its own subculture there, and that phenomenon is really central to Zoya, to her life, and to her work. Her Soviet upbringing is really quite important to what she's accomplished. She was engaged with painting from her early childhood, trained first in the Soviet Union, then in Israel for high school and college. And for her, art has been a pathway to relate to the mainstream there and to engage with and depict the immigrant experience in relation to the mainstream. And for her, this resonance between her stature in the Soviet Union and then her arrival in Israel as a part of the culture, but a minority of that culture, is really central and essential to her work. So Zoya, to begin, you tell us your history from your perspective, not mine.
Thank you, James. I was born in Kiev, Ukraine in 1976. And like in Soviet Union, any education starts very early. Like when you are like 5 years old, you're already too old to start doing something professionally. So I started studying art very early in the major art school of Republic of Ukraine. And it was like pretty academic training, but I mean, I didn't know much about contemporary art. But when I moved to Israel with my parents when I was 14, I landed in the same type of art school, and actually I've discovered that there are like artists after Picasso, so it was like really amazing to see. But I like somehow kept my Soviet heritage, like as painter. And I attended Midrasha art school, and actually I had like very mainstream Israeli career as artist, even that I'm like not very mainstream in my art, in the way I approach art. Yeah.
You know, don't leave the early years so quickly. Talk about your grandpa.
Yeah, actually it's my grandpa's uncle. He was quite famous artist in Kazakhstan. He was like born in Ukraine, but then in Stalin's time he was in a camp for 2 years, and after being in a camp he could not return to European part of Soviet Union, so he went to Kazakhstan, and he became one of the major academic artists of like Kazakhstan's art academy. Like everybody who's from Kazakhstan knows him. And he just died 10 years before I was born, but we have some of his paintings, and also there were his paintings in art museum in Kiev, like in I don't remember how it's called, like the Ukraine Museum of Art. And actually, like he was like the artist in the family. Like this artist was always running in the family.
And you absorbed quite an influence from him, because knowing you, and I've known Zoya for a decade or more, and as Nelly mentioned, we did in 2017 do a really amazing exhibition called Pravda, which was Zoya looking at the experience of the Soviet emigre community in Israel as its own subculture there. And it's a kind of phenomenon of having worked very hard to leave the Soviet Union, but only finding comfort in Israel by recreating their own mini Soviet Union there. And the work has a kind of dry humor to it. There's a sarcasm there. Her work has changed over time, but our experience at the Israel Museum, that work was very clarifying. And talk a little bit about how your academic training filled you with art history, which was a certain kind of vocabulary, but then you changed that vocabulary to respond to your experience being an outsider in Israel and making your own culture there.
Yeah. I think like when I arrived to Israel in the 90s, the painting was dead. And it was like really like a shame to know how to paint. So like I was sort of like hiding it in some way, because I've seen that like it was like mostly conceptual art popular in Israel at that time, and in the art school this Soviet style was seen as like out-fashioned and anachronistic, and like even one of the teachers said like you are so like I was like punk and had like all this type of things on my face, you know, and like chains and everything, and he said like look at you, why you paint like grandmother. And so, yeah, so, and like, you know, I thought he just doesn't understand. So I kept painting like grandmother. And then at some point, I think like at some point I sort of abandoned painting and I started doing like mostly like institutional criticism, like art about art. And I had an exhibition in Tel Aviv Museum of Art, like focusing on like institutional criticism, and then at some point I understood that I'm sort of like bored of it, and I wanna go back to life, like bring things from real life. And then I just thought like, what is the subject that I'm most familiar with? And this, of course, the post-Soviet diaspora in Israel. So I started like. I thought this was gonna be like my subject, and it was like the first time that this subject was so widely like spoken in Israeli art, I think. And I was like really happy because it evoked a lot of public discussion, and I think it also gave courage to many post-Soviet artists like of younger generation to talk about this subject. And actually my style in this exhibition was influenced. It was not even like so much Soviet style, it was influenced by Soviet cartoons. Like there were like people from America, they usually say like that it reminds them comics, but there was no comics in Soviet Union. We had like political cartoons, like criticizing the like American imperialism and things like that. Yeah, so like these were the magazines that I was influenced by.
You know, Zoya's work at that time, at the time of our exhibition, Pravda, really was about caricature and satire, but it used the traditional medium of painting on canvas. And earlier in her work, she really brought Impressionism, Post-Impressionism, the Barbizon School, trying to bring nature and art together in a way that was not happening then in Israel. Israeli artists were being very anti-traditional. They didn't use traditional mediums, and this stood out as a kind of signature. And when Zoya in 2017 came back to using paint and canvas, it was to make this expression of her own historical culture transported to Israel.
Yeah, I mean, I just was like, I started learning art because I was like a girl who liked to paint. And like when I was getting more conceptual, I sort of like was missing this time when I enjoyed painting and was like solving painting questions.
And caricature, humor, satire entered your voice then.
Yeah.
And on the other hand, it's kind of a deadpan expression, but it is also about humor.
Yes, of course. I mean, this is part of my personality, and also, like, it took me like 25 years to make a reflection on this immigrant experience, which was, of course, traumatic. But I also like, it's already like the distance is big enough to address it with humor. So the exhibition, it was like this project was sort of like tragic and comic at the same time, because I think this is like the Jewish humor, you know, tears and laughter.
You know, you're right. It's tragedy and comedy at the same time. And a year ago, Zoya had an exhibition here at Fort Gansfort Gallery, which was, a lot of which was based on her looking not just at her own experience as an emigre to Israel, but at the experience of other emigre communities elsewhere in the world. Zoya's husband, Sonny, was a Nigerian migrant worker who came to Israel, and they have spent time in Europe where Zoya did a series of paintings about the experience of the Nigerian emigre community across Europe, which is also about humor, also about parody, but it's not your own culture, it's Sunny's culture, and it's not about coming to Israel, it's just about the experience of emigres worldwide.
Yeah, I think like in Israel, you know, like being mixed couple is not as common as in the States. So I think like I know all of them personally.
That was an understatement.
Like I think I know such couples personally, like all of them, and yeah, and it's like. You know, like when we are abroad with Sunny, we enjoy that nobody's like looking at us on the street, like what is this, what is going on, you know, like what a weird couple. You know? So, and on the same time, when we travel to Europe, there is like huge African diaspora in Europe, and we all the time are looking for African markets because there's like something that's like African food that they don't sell in Israel. So like we always like bring a lot of things with us. And even when I travel a lot, I'm like already professional with this Nigerian food, so I always go and find it for Sunny. And I always have like sketchbook in my bag, so I always sketch like wherever I go. So like with, like we are married like for 15 years, so in this period of time I already collect a lot of footage from like different situations, like with Nigerian diaspora, like everywhere in the world. And I was like waiting for like some push to make an exhibition dedicated to it, and then this my grandfather's uncle from Kazakhstan. Somebody sent me a painting of his, like his early painting, and there is like really weird situation like for Soviet Russia depicted on it. There's like Ukrainian family sitting in their home, and behind the window there is like big factory. And there is like a black couple, like two man and woman. They are like visiting this family, and the man is like lifting their kids. And somebody sent it to me on Facebook and said like, look, this is your family. And I was like, oh, this is my family. And I was like really, I didn't understand what is it, because there is like not so many Africans in Ukraine or Russia even now. But in 30s, like I thought like, what is depicted in this painting? And then I started searching for information, and I found that in the 30s, when Soviet Union was undergoing through massive industrialization, they built like new factories and brought new equipment, and they were looking for qualified workers to come and teach the locals how to operate all these like new machines. And then they arrived to America, and they like tried to tempt like workers, like qualified workers, to come and work in Soviet Union. And there were African Americans among them, because like during this time of Great Depression, it was like especially hard for them to find a job, and like the Soviets, they offer like good condition. And one of them even wrote a memoir. He was like in Soviet Union until the 70s, and then he liked it less, so he like came back to United States, but it was like really interesting.
And you know, this painting, I wish we could show it to you. It's very touching because it's Zoya using her art, using painting as a way to look at the experience of specific cultures wandering in the diaspora. It's not just about Soviet emigres to Israel. So, where I wanted to go next, this is really interesting. In her early 30s, Zoya went off to Berlin, and she became awakened to the phenomenon of politics and how art and art activism can be a kind of antidote to charged politics that we've just now experienced. And you know, it is part of the history of her early history in the Soviet Union, and this notion, and we're all familiar with this, those of us who are involved in art and art history, this idea that tough times create new visual vocabularies. The Russian Revolution produced Chagall, Elisitsky, supremacism. World War I produced Dada and Surrealism. World War II produced abstraction and minimalism. And the work that I hope you've already seen on the third floor. If not, you'll go see it. Well, not tonight after this, but on another occasion. But Zoya, I want you to talk about your vocabulary and how you feel what is happening now is going to affect your vocabulary.
I think like what is happening now is like still happening, so it's a little bit too early to make reflection of it, and like I don't know how it will affect my vocabulary because the war is still going on and it's not finished, and I think it will take time. Like, yeah.
It will take time, and actually I'm going to tell you that it already has changed your vocabulary. The kind of satire, caricature, the kind of dry humor that we saw in your work is not what you are seeing in the series of drawings from October 7, which are upstairs. You know, after October 7, the very next day, Zoya took her 8-year-old daughter, Vera, who was here this afternoon to see the installation, took her to Berlin. She grabbed colored pencils, watercolor, small format paper, and she went to Berlin, produced the 12 drawings that you see in this installation. You know, if I can for a moment, because really credit is due to them, it's a miracle that we accomplished that installation 4 weeks after Zoya finished her drawings. And actually just now, in 3 weeks, we produced, or actually her gallery, Fort Gansfort, Adam Shopkorn, and Maggie Doherty, who are sitting here, made it possible together with us, produced a small volume which is commemorating this installation. The installation is deeply moving, quite important. I do want to thank Darcy Alexander, our chief curator, Claudia Nasson, and Becky Frank for making the installation possible here as quickly as they did. And when you look at this installation, and Zoya saw it for the first time at 10 a.m. this morning, it is deeply moving. It is a different language. This is not dry humor. This is not caricature. There's a completely different attitude that produced these drawings, and I want you to speak about that.
Yeah, I think there's just nothing funny about the 7th of October, you know, so like there was like nothing to be like ironic about, and unfortunately this is already like second time that I experience this type of emotions, because when the war in Ukraine burst, it was like more or less the same, and like I woke up and I've seen Russian tanks in my neighborhood in Kiev, and like I couldn't believe my eyes the same way I couldn't believe to what is happening on the 7th of October, and I guess like making these drawings, it was sort of like psychotic reaction to the situations, because like you feel that everything is like collapsing, and then like this is the only thing that which is always like with me, like I always can paint, and I think it was the same with the war in Ukraine, because like all my family was there, and I was trying to bring them to Israel, and in the end they came to Israel. And I also did like series of 12 drawings addressing this situation of war in Ukraine, and it's like actually it's like accidentally, but it's the same amount of drawings was October the 7th, because I think that like in the first months when the shock is still fresh, this is where I work, and then I feel like that I like don't touch this subject anymore.
Well, that's a question here, because these drawings, we hope, will become, these are working drawings for what will become paintings.
Yeah.
And we can't wait to see how those paintings will come out. You know, if you want to think art historically for a moment, you've brought into these works, there's a kind of figuration, a kind of social realism that goes back to your Soviet heritage, and in a way, it's graphic documentation. And it's also for you art history, because if you've seen the works, you see these specific references to Picasso, to Guernica, to women running on the beach, to the massacre of the innocents, which is Giotto. And it's as if you're taking the reality of the brutality of these current experiences and creating metaphors relating to your sense of art history and the meaning of art in the past.
Yes, I mean, it was like the big question how you depict suffering, because like it's hard, and I thought like I like consciously adopted in a way the style of like the modernist style of the Second World War, because like also I was in Germany and I was like living near Käthe Kollwitzplatz, and Käthe Kollwitz is like one of the most powerful female artists that depicted the horrors of the Second World War. So I think like I was like affected by like being in Berlin, and also I think like you can see the influence of German expressionism in this series.
And you know, this is an especially important point of intersection for you as an artist, because it's not just using art to respond to the moment, but using art history.
Yeah.
And because of your training, that art history is part of your vocabulary. And for us, it's going to be, you're exactly correct, it's too soon to know what new kinds of vocabulary this challenging time will produce. But we will see that, and I think we'll see that in the works, that in the paintings that will come from these drawings.
Yeah, I only like when I woke up on 7th of October, like we woke up because of alarm, and I had friends from St. Petersburg visiting us, and they said, look, there is a newspaper, they write that terrorists are going from house to house and killing people, and I said, this must be your fake Russian news, like this cannot be true, like this cannot happen. And then like I've seen that it was not fake, unfortunately, and like the information came gradually, like we didn't know the whole pictures like so fast. So I thought it only happened in Kibbutz Be'eri, so like my memory immediately brought me Guernica, and I like posted on Instagram and I wrote like Be'eri, and but then I've learned that it happened like in so many places.
You know, when we started so I saw these drawings which were posted on Instagram. Darcy Alexander, our chief curator, also saw them. We thought immediately we want these here. We did reach Adam Shopcorn and we said, can we show these at the earliest possible time? He was open to our wanting to do so. We were able to accomplish it. In our back and forth, Zoya mentioned Guernica, and she mentioned the Giotto massacre of the innocents. She didn't mention Picasso women running by the sea. But when I saw the depiction of the young people running from the festival, I immediately thought of this. And this morning as we walked together, I asked Zoya about this, and she said, yes, of course. And she then also said that initially she depicted only women running. Talk about this and talk about the change.
Yeah, like somehow I initially depicted only women in the Nova Festival, but then I thought like, why should it be only women? Because there was also men killed and kidnapped from this festival. But somehow I think like as a woman I feel like I always like imagine myself like, you know, in this type of situation, because I think like in Israel when it happened, it was like everybody was feeling that it's like totally accident that it didn't happen like to you, like it could have happened to anyone.
You know, looking at these images, you weren't there. And you weren't in Israel seeing what the media was generating. You were in Berlin. You were really quite distant.
Yeah.
But there's something incredibly powerfully accurate about the imagery.
I was not even I was even trying not to watch too much media, because also my daughter was with me, so I didn't want her to see this. And but of course I've seen some, but I purposely tried not to base my drawings on like specific images, because it was important for me to keep it generalized and metaphoric, because it's like related to everyone. It's not just specific people's stories. It's like,
you know, you can say that it's generalized and metaphorical. At the same time, there really is this kind of accuracy, and you telegraph a very powerful message. You know, the image of bring our children home, the image of what were known to be the kidnapped children
Yeah.
at the time that you did your drawing has become a banner hanging from a tall building in Tel Aviv. Everyone in Israel is taking note of these images as if they are telegraphing the reality of what that tragedy was about.
Actually, this image is the only image that is based on like depicting specific people, like the kidnapped children. And at that time, we knew only about 18 of them. And later, we found out that there was like over 30. And almost all of these children from these drawings, they are back, except of the Bibas brothers, who are like the baby and the 4 years old kidnapped. And there is another boy called, his name is Tomer Arava. He was killed on 7th of October, and Hamas forced him to go to his neighbors' houses and tell them to open doors, so they will open door to terrorists and then shoot him in the end.
And these are stories that all of us did see in the media internationally, but seeing them interpreted this way through an artistic hand and with an artistic vocabulary adds another level of meaning to them.
Yeah.
So this morning, Zoya saw our installation for the first time. How did you feel going in and seeing the drawings there? How did you feel seeing them here in this installation as distinct from how you saw them as you drew them and put them away?
Well, I think like I think the installation is like really is like helping to understand these drawings because like I've seen it in the photos, but I didn't imagine it's like so dark, and I think it's like given this atmosphere of like shelter or like even tunnel, you know, things like it's like claustrophobic. The space is claustrophobic, so I think it's like this is how it's supposed to be.
You know, for us experiencing the installation, it's as if you're going into a shelter to be protected, but the opposite happens.
Yeah.
And you see the drawings, and there's so much vitality in the palette of the drawings that you think that when you get up close and look at them, you're going to see an appealing image, a beautiful image. You know, it's like from the darkness to the light, but you see the opposite. And for a lot of people that I've taken through the installation, their first comment has been they forgot the depth of brutality of what happened on October 7, and these images resurrect that. What does that mean for you? To know that the drawings have that effect on people who are seeing them?
I think I didn't have like time to digest it, you know, because like it's like the first time I've seen it myself, and I was it like was important for me to post these drawings on Instagram, like so people. Like it sort of went viral, so it was like important for me to make this voice of like Israelis and Jews like sound. But I'm not thinking about like future so much. I'm thinking about like the
Well,
next
you know
day.
you know who you're dealing with here, a pathological optimist and a romantic. And so I need, and you know, museums need to find ways to get past the challenges of a moment and to find a brighter time ahead. And you know, I spoke at the beginning about how it's the responsibility of museums to be engaged in cultural activism, cultural diplomacy. And yours has been a life of activism through art. This is how you trained as a kid. This is how you adjusted to leaving the Soviet Union, getting to Israel. If you can, speak to this point about activism through art and what art can do, not just what you've done just now, but what art can do to get you from a moment to another time.
You know, Menashe Kadishman said that Picasso's Guernica did not stop the war, But on other hand, I believe that there is like something that art is still doing, because like as artists you feel like very helpless when something like that is going to happen, because like what you can do, like you want to do something but you're like helpless. But somehow I think like when I've seen reaction of the people, I've seen that art is like doing something, and it like made me also like optimistic in a way that it's important to do art even in the wartime.
You know, that's a wonderful comment and observation to end this conversation. I really have to thank you, because really museums are here to be the custodians of exactly what you've just talked about. And you just need to know how appreciative we are of your collaboration in bringing these drawings here and giving an audience an opportunity to experience them and to be not just receptive to our showing them, but embracing and endorsing of our doing so. The media has had a similar response, and unlike what we all just experienced, which is the pushback, without this kind of engagement, your work could not be a better antidote to that. And I want to thank you, and we want to thank all of you for being here with us. The two of us will linger in the front if you want to come up and talk to us afterward. And thanks very much for being here.